But first, love you to have your say this morning on this question. Do you think Britain should follow France and ban smacking? France has become the 52nd country in the world to ban smacking. Those who break the new law face no criminal sanctions, making it largely a symbolic change. But child protection groups say it's as an essential one to put an end to what decades of research suggests is a totally counterproductive practice. Well, the move now leaves Britain as only one of 4 countries in Europe where smacking remains a legal way of disciplining children. In England and Wales, there's no ban on smacking and parents are allowed to use reasonable chastisement. However, hitting a child so hard that it leaves a mark or causes bruising, swelling, cuts, grazes or scratches, that could result in criminal charges. Well, those who want smacking to be banned say it's because children can go on to suffer mental health problems and have a negative relationship with their parents and even suffer from very low self-esteem because of the smacking. However, physical punishment is still very common in the UK, and those in favour of smacking say that it teaches children respect. It's an effective form of discipline, and it doesn't affect them in later life if they actually feel loved. Well, today I'd love to hear from you. Do you think Britain should now follow France and ban smacking? You can call this morning on 03459 455 555. You can text me 81333, starting your message with 3CR. You can email jvsshow@bbc.co.uk, and you can tweet me at @TheTimWheeler. Your calls this morning. Do you think Britain should follow France and ban smacking?
Have your say on today's big phone-in.
Call 03459 455 555.
The JVS Show.
BBC Three Counties Radio.
Yes, Tim Wheeler in for Jonathan Vernon-Smith for the rest of this week, and that phone number you need, 03459 455 555. So here's a few things I'd like to hear from you this morning. If you have young children and you do smack them, or you have smacked them in the past, I'd love to hear from you to explain why you did it. And if you never smack, I'd love to hear from you to explain what kind of strategies you have in place to make sure that your child knows they've done something wrong, to discipline them and reduce the chance of it ever happening again. And maybe you're now a grown-up parent, perhaps you're a grandparent, but you can tell me about the experience you had when you were raising young children. Was smacking part of your arsenal, I suppose, in keeping your children under control? And here's a particularly interesting one. If you have smacked a child in public in the past, what kind of response did you get? Has it now become such a socially unacceptable thing that you just wouldn't do it in public? And perhaps when you see people doing it in public, it horrifies you. 03459 455 555 is the number you need. Let's speak to B. Marshall, who is a parenting expert and runs the website bmarshall.com, and is the founder of Yes Parenting. Morning to you, B.
Good morning, Tim.
B, what's your response to this news that France has banned smacking? Are you pleased? Would you like to see us do the same here?
Yeah, I think it's absolutely fantastic. I think it's such a positive move in exactly the right direction. I really don't think it matters that they're not kind of having criminal sanctions. It's such a bold statement about the value that France places on children as part of their society. And I'm kind of shocked when I was listening to the statistics about the fact that the UK is only one of 4 countries left in Europe yet to make this move. I thought, gosh, how backward are we? I think it's brilliant.
It was really interesting actually looking at this story because whilst, as you say, the law has come in, and it's a symbolic thing, but it does show that the French government wants to state that this is their reasonable expectation of a social standard. This is what they expect parents to conform to. But I understand that as many as 80% of French parents do routinely use some kind of physical force to discipline their children, and there's certainly no will from the French people to ban smacking. It's something the government's decided to do. I just wonder in this country whether or not there would be the will amongst the parents listening to this programme now to ban it, or whether actually most people in this country still like to use a bit of force where necessary. What do you hear when you speak to parents?
It's interesting you use that phrase, to use force where necessary. I don't believe that there's ever a time or a case with a child where force is necessary. And when I speak to parents who do have this kind of belief that it's okay to smack children, when we start to unpick it, discover is that often by that point they feel a little bit out of control and hopeless in whatever the situation is with their child, and they've lost perspective on what's going on. And so what I do is I help them understand that to begin with, every behaviour has a positive intention, even the behaviours that we really don't want. Our child is doing their best in that way to make their world right. And our job as parents is to help them learn and understand why the behaviour that they exhibited isn't the best way to go about whatever it is they're trying to do, and how to kind of how to behave in a better way, in a way that is acceptable to us as a family, acceptable to us as a society, in a way that is considerate and respectful and all those kinds of things. Our children want to grow up to be successful human beings.
Well, I understand that your point there, but surely children don't really know what they want. I mean, let me just read, for example, I was looking at a few personal stories this morning of people who have smacked, and it's quite interesting. There was a few programs on various channels, and there are various mums and dads who've contributed to articles about this. This is quite an interesting line that I read this morning. Although we never use the rod, we believe the principle to be true. It's a biblical proverb on their kitchen wall that reads, "The rod of corrections brings respect, but a child left to its own devices disgraces the mother." The first time I smacked my eldest child, he was 10 months old. He was trying to put his fingers in a plug socket. Obviously it was dangerous, so I told him not to do it and I moved him away, but he crawled back. This time I smacked his hand gently. I shocked him, and I made him realise that no meant no. He then associated doing something dangerous with a smack. I didn't want to inflict pain, but I felt it was the safest option, and I'd rather he got a tiny smack from me than an electric shock. When my husband came home that day, he agreed that it had been the right thing to do. I mean, in circumstances like that, with a 10-month-old child who hasn't got the grasp of language or to understand everything you're trying to explain to them as a parent, do you not see in a circumstance like that a smack on the hand could be useful?
No, I don't think a smack on the hand is useful. I think with a 10-month-old child is a baby. They're so little still. You can pick a 10-month-old baby up so easily. You can take them to another room. You can do something different with them. But the thing about a plug socket is that in that situation, you don't need to control your child. You control the environment. You can get those special plug socket covers that you can put in, and then it's not even possible for your child to put their finger in. And once they're old enough to understand, you can remove that kind of child safety mechanism. So many parents think that they need to control their child's behaviour as they grow up in order for them to know how to behave well, and actually the opposite is true. And when you said to me earlier, but surely young children don't know what they want. We are biologically hardwired to want and need love, safety and belonging. That's something that's been with us for hundreds and thousands of years. And when we provide love, safety and belonging, our children trust us and they seek to follow what we show them in order to grow up successfully.
But is there not a danger here that we're dealing with some kind of social snobbery that we are promoting this idea, or you're promoting this idea that all children are the same, all children will respond to their parents calmly explaining why they're doing something wrong, and perhaps it's wrong of us to promote this idea that if you do smack, you're obviously a failing parent who isn't intelligent enough to discipline their child without force. Is there not some kind of a social snobbery here? And we can't really definitively say that all children are the same and will all respond to the same, I suppose, linguistic approach to discipline.
Well, I certainly don't think there's a social snobbery. I think that every parent is doing their best with the resources that they have. But, when you know better, you do better. And so, before I radically rethought my parenting, I was an incredibly controlling parent. I would have smacked and things like that. And then I started to see things differently, and I really changed the way that I parented. It doesn't necessarily make somebody who is still smacking, some kind of lower rate parent. It just means that that's them parenting to the best of their ability now.
But surely, based on what you said, it does make them a lower rate parent in your eyes, or certainly maybe not a lower rate human being, but a parent who hasn't seen the light, a parent who hasn't had sufficient education to, by your perspective, to understand that smacking is completely unnecessary.
But I think that that's about the journey. We're always learning every single day, as are our children. And it's not about them being a lower rate parent. It's about recognising that every parent is doing their best. And a situation like France making this decision and it coming into our news means that we have an opportunity to talk about this, and for parents to go, oh, maybe there is another way. Maybe I don't have to exert power over my child in order to raise my child in a way that is going to create the amazing adult that I want to create.
But let's bring another parent into the conversation. It's Jenny in Wootton, who I understand has a different view on the way children should be disciplined. Morning to you, Jenny.
Good morning.
So we've heard this morning, Jenny, that B doesn't believe that there's ever any need to use any kind of physical approach to disciplining children. It's just never necessary. What's your perspective on that?
Well, first of all, I'd like to ask her if she agrees or disagrees that in society today there is very little discipline with children. Children seem to rule the roost. They can do what they like. They tell you can't touch them. If you're a teacher, there's very little discipline in schools now, which is why children are failing and blah blah blah.
Well, let's give B. You asked whether she agrees with that. Let's give her a chance to respond. B, what's your response to that about the lack of respect and control we have in society at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting question. I rarely say the word no. I don't have any form of punishment or reward in my home. And yet I have two boys who are so incredibly respectful, considerate, kind, etc., etc. So the families that I work with, I mean, hundreds of families around the world who I work with Yes Parenting, showing them how to raise children without punishment and reward, are also experiencing this transformation in how their children are. And they write to me and they say to me, I cannot believe how different my child is now that I am doing it differently. So what's going on in our education system is a whole other conversation. But for example, one of the things that you said was that, in school, children can say to a teacher, you can't touch me. Well, of course, absolutely. It's a child's body, and it is fine for that child to say, you can't touch me. It is not our prerogative as adults, because we have the greater physical strength, because we have the greater power, because we are developed and mature
maybe,
to be able to put our power over our children.
But maybe Jenny and Wootton, maybe you feel that actually that this is a direction of travel that has not been very, very good. It's a regressive way of travel because children are becoming too powerful and adults seem to have less and less power.
I agree with you 100%. There is no power to adults now, and children rule. Secondly, I agree that you cannot and must not put everybody in the same basket and say all children can be treated X, Y, and Z way, because every child needs a different approach. However, I do think that no means no, and if you say no 2 or 3 times and they still defy, which most children will try you out, then you do a little smack on the leg, smack on the bottom, so they know that no means no.
Jen, I think this is a really good point. And B, let me bring a bit of my personal experience, B. I was smacked. My parents smacked me. I can just about remember one incident when I was smacked. It was always after being told not to do something a series of times, and then eventually, if I still was doing it, I would get a smack. I remember being terrified of being smacked. I remember it being the one thing where I would run around the house, run away from my mum if she was going to smack me. It was the one thing that really made me realise Mum is furious with me. I've done something wrong. Now, to be honest, I don't resent that. I can completely understand. If I was a young kid and I kept on doing something, as Jenny suggested, that and I just wouldn't listen to my mum and she eventually smacked me around the bum, then to be honest, when I become a parent, I'm not entirely sure I'll take a different approach.
No, absolutely. No means no, and
I agree with that.
Very few children today
B,
realise that.
So B, how does no mean no in your house? If no is being said 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, and the child continues to do something you don't want them to do?
Well, I mean, I rarely say no, but on the odd occasion when I say no, I probably say it once, and then on a very rare occasion have to say it twice. The fact that I say it so rarely and have such a different response means that when my children hear no, they respond to it immediately, not because I am resorting to smacking or some other form of punishment, but because we have equal power together in our relationship. And what I'm hearing Jenny say is, although she says it's not about power, it is always about power if you, at the end of the day, are exerting something over your child that your child would not be free to do back to you. And I can't imagine from listening to Jenny that it would be okay for her child to smack her on the leg or on the arm.
But then Jenny's the parent or the adult in this relationship who and you seem to be elevating children to
an
be
equal level to
but
adults.
well, maybe there'll be people listening that think, well, hang on a minute, children aren't equal to adults, and part of the reason we have so much indiscipline in schools, and part of the reason that we have such a failure amongst young people in this country to have showed a basic level of respect to adults is that they are being told by people like you that they are equal to their parents, even though they know less than their parents, they have less power than their parents, they shouldn't be making decisions in the house that like their parents are. Is this not the root of our problem?
But you're talking about a different type of equality there, which takes us back to when we believed as a nation that men had more power than women, and now we recognise the equality there. It's exactly the same. Just because I make the decisions about how we spend the money, for example, doesn't take away my child's equality to me in terms of their value as a human being and their rights to love, safety and belonging. There is nothing safe about a child's experience of being smacked if, like you, Tim, and in my experience on occasions, you are running away from your mother because you fear she's going to smack you. That is not a safe way to live in your emotional well-being.
But I disagree. I just remember. I'll come to you in a second, Jenny, for a response to what Bee's been saying. I just remember the fear. I grew up being scared of my mum and dad. I'm now friends with my mum and dad, but I grew up being scared of my mum and dad. And I look back on that and think that's absolutely the way it should be. Far too many parents nowadays, I think, are trying to be friends with their children. And look at the disastrous results we've seen in some of our schools and in town centres and in parks when you see these kids who've got absolutely no response to their parents whatsoever, no respect. I grew up fearing my mum and dad, and I'm happy that was the case. Jenny, you wanted to come in on something Beard said.
I just want to say, as long as a child, all children, know they are loved. They know they are loved. And once you've said no 3 times and you've smacked them, then you talk to them and say, no means no, I do love you, but you have to behave in the way that you should behave. You know, all children will defy. This lady seems to have 2 saintly boys. Of course there are children like that. There are placid children, there are placid people, all different people in the world. And you can't treat everybody in the same way. But you've got to admit that it's gone too far. And we have a society with absolutely very little respect for anyone.
Well, let's put that.
People. I was on the train, on the bus the other week, and a mother and a young child were sitting on the seat. There was an old lady came in. The mother did not say to the child, please come and sit on my lap and let this old lady sit down. No. The child sat there and looked at the old lady standing up. You know, there is no respect now, or very little. And quite honestly, I think this lady is, obviously she's got the best interests of her children at heart, well, most people have, but you see people in supermarkets and things speaking to their children in the most disgusting way, swearing at them and all that business, you know. So you've got that kind of parenting. You've got this other kind of parenting. You can't, you can't put everyone in the same basket.
Jenny, thank you very much for your time, Jenny and Wootton. B, can I just put something to you, because you're a parent and I'm not, and all I can base this on is my own experiences and the experience of seeing my nephews being raised and my niece being raised. If a child of yours was, for example, kicking a wall in your house, and they were kicking it because they could see it was making a little mark with their trainer, and they were kicking the wall, and you went and you said, no, you don't do that, you don't kick the wall, and they continued to kick the wall. You went back into the room, a few minutes later, and they'd started kicking the wall again to make these marks. Can you describe to me, or almost live out, the kind of conversation you would have with a child under those circumstances to put an end to that behaviour altogether? Just a bit of an
Yeah,
insight into your
absolutely.
approach.
So I wouldn't even start by asking them to stop kicking the wall. I would start by I would immediately think, okay, why are they kicking the wall? They're probably angry. So I would just say, oh, it looks like you're really angry and you want to kick the wall. And generally, when you say that, they're like, yes, I'm really angry. And then I would just say, why are you angry? What's going on? And I'd let them carry on kicking the wall. We'd have the conversation about the anger. I would help them resolve that situation, at which point they would generally stop kicking the wall, or then I would say, come away from the wall, let's talk about this, or let's have a cuddle, or whatever, and then I would go back and I would clean the mark off the wall. When a child experiences empathy, that they are validated, that they are heard, and the parent is there to help them resolve what's gone wrong, then the behaviour just dissolves. We don't have to stop the behaviour. We have to meet our child at the point that has led to the behaviour.
So I'm going to bring Ed in a second. Ed, I'm coming to you in just a moment. I've just had a glimpse, actually, into what I would be as a parent, because I was just thinking about that scenario and thinking about finding myself, and that's my initial response would be to pick them up, to smack their hands, to shout at them, and to probably put them upstairs for a period of time in their room. That would be my response. They've learned that if they make a mark on the wall of the house, it's absolutely unacceptable. It's something they should not do. They will never do it again. And if they do it again, they'll get a smack on the hand and they'll be put in their room and punished.
Okay, and in that situation, how are you helping your young child learn how to manage their frustration and their anger and to deal with that in a different way moving forward?
I feel as though you're overcomplexing the thoughts children have, to elevating their thoughts to a much more impressive level than perhaps they actually are going through. I think people do things impulsively, don't they? I don't think they're always considering why they're doing it. There are impulsive things that children do.
They're being subconscious. It's like a cognitive response. It's an instinctive response. Under the age of 7, your child hasn't really got an awful lot of conscious thought anyway, because their brainwave is in a state of subconscious thinking. But what that means is that our child is kicking the wall because they're cross about something.
Are you sure about that? Are you sure about that?
You know how people talk about the terrible twos, for example? At the age of 2, what's happening is your child is realising that actually they're separate from mum, there's this big wide world, and they're starting to work out their place in it. And then they get very frustrated because, they can't do this and they can't do that. And so that's when the tantrums start, because of the frustration. It's not about the child having a thought process of, oh, I'm angry or frustrated, I'm going to have a tantrum, or I'm going to kick the wall. It's about recognising that your child is just exhibiting a raw form of the kinds of behaviours we have when we get cross as adults.
What about if smacking works? What about if you smack that child round the hand, you shout at them, you say, you never do that again, you take them upstairs, you put them in their room, you lock them in there, and you deny them any of the privilege they have for the rest of that day. What if it works?
I don't want my child to experience. It doesn't work.
But it does work for thousands of people listening to this programme. It must work. There have been generations of people doing this.
It doesn't work, because ultimately what happens is you have a child who's living in fear, which is what you've described about your own experience. I don't want my children, or any children, to be living in a state of fear. I want them to live in safety and trust with their parents.
But I'm a living example of someone, and I know most of my friends were smacked, and we've all grown up to be very law-abiding, peaceable, helpful, kind people. It worked for us.
But Tim, it's not peaceful and kind if your instinct to a child who's kicking the wall is to smack them, to put them upstairs, and to...
But are children not more like miniature animals? I mean, children are animals that respond to impulses, and they respond to things in a similar way to dogs do. And let me read some text that are coming in for you. OC says, who says this woman is an expert? How arrogant to think her opinion is superior to those of thousands of parents with years of experience. Why is it okay to bore children to death with constant hectoring but not to give them a mild slap? This person says, my 3-year-old would kick out at his 4-year-old brother when he got the chance. For weeks I tried the naughty step. One short smack on the back of the leg solved it. I think smacking is confused with beating. Janet says a reasoned and moderate quick slap on the leg or arm stops the child who is out of control and gives control back to the adult. We've become far too tolerant of bad behaviour in all walks of life. My mother would dispense swift punishment and we stopped her tantrums at once. This text says, I'm sure I had the odd slap when I was a child and it's done me no harm. No wonder there are so many nasty kids about these days with these do-gooders saying you mustn't slap a child. We're talking about a small slap, not child abuse. Some support coming for you as well, B. And look, I think I may disagree with you on some things, but I respect the fact that you have been through it. You've parented your children. I'm sure they're fabulous, and you've no doubt helped many other parents to have a very peaceable upbringing for their children, which is something I crave. Don't get me wrong. I don't look at smacking as being a positive thing, a fun thing, something I'd definitely love to do. If it was necessary, I don't feel convinced that it's always wrong.
Okay, I mean, there was one thing that Jenny said. She talked about me having saintly boys. I would just like to make it clear to you and to anyone listening, I have two very different boys, but one is a wild child. I mean, he's the child who is out there, he's doing things, he's impulsive. And I have one child who is quieter and more kind of sensitive and things like that. But I have very real children. I have a very real family life. I'm certainly not perfect, but I do know from my experience, having gone down the punishment route when my children were little and then radically rethinking my parenting and moving in a different direction than developing Yes Parenting, and now sharing that with families all around the world and seeing that for every family that works with me, it has not failed yet. So I do believe that there is a different way, and if we choose to support our children's sense of love, safety and belonging, and we respond with compassion and kindness and acceptance of our children, it radically changes their experience of growing up.
B, I thank you very much. B Marshall, thanks so much for your time. A parenting expert who runs bmarshall.com.